Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Extra Serving, a Nation's Restaurant News podcast. I'm your host, Holly Petre. Today we're going to be talking about the major themes we've taken away from earnings season. One of the major themes was a desire to grow traffic. While that may seem obvious, this quarter overlapped a quarter last year that was semi-normal, so the year-over-year traffic numbers are relatively evened out. How are these brands proposing a traffic increase to their brand? Also, we noticed that everyone is trying to grow exponentially. Last quarter, Chipotle announced it was trying to double its store count to 7,000 units. That comes before a quarter where Burger King announced it was also going after more store openings, and the king of them all, McDonald's, is trying to grow in the US. This is all colored by smaller brands growing during a time of uncertainty. The industry is still facing supply chain issues when trying to build, leaving signed agreements in the early stages of construction. Why are smaller brands seeing success where larger brands are facing obstacles? This week's interview is from our series on LinkedIn Live called LinkedIn Live. The show is hosted by senior editor Ron Ruggles once a month. The episode you're going to listen to features Jeff Kakara, CEO of the casual dining concept 60 Vines, and John Olney, head winemaker and chief operating officer at Ridge Vineyard. Now it's time to introduce my co-hosts.
I'm Sam Oches, editor-in-chief of Nation's Restaurant News.
And I'm Leanne Zinsmeister, managing editor of NRN.
And now let's kick it over to this week's sponsor.
Restaurant leaders need two things to grow their businesses. They need connections to better inform their decision-making, and they need a break. Running a restaurant company is hard work. Nation's Restaurant News is offering both this fall at our Create Experience. Held October 1st through 3rd in beautiful Palm Springs, California, the Create Experience promises to be an unforgettable 3 days for growth-minded restaurateurs. Better yet, it's totally free for restaurant leaders. Join us in Palm Springs to be a part of this one-of-a-kind experience. Visit create.nrn.com/Palm Springs to learn more and to register. That's create.nrn.com/Palm Springs.
All right, guys, welcome back. Sam, you're on vacation. Welcome back to the loveliness that is your job.
Oh, thank you. Loveliness / mountain of emails. Yes, it's the best.
That's very fair. I mean, aren't you glad to be back? We work in a fun industry.
Hey, don't get me wrong. Yes, there's something sort of strangely gratifying about going through the many hundreds of emails sitting in my inbox waiting for me because I'm a weirdo and I am addicted to email. And so it's like getting my fix. It's probably unhealthy. I should probably talk to somebody about that. But yeah, I spent a good 2 hours this morning getting my fix. But yes, word of the wise to those of you who don't believe in it, vacations, they're good. Don't look at email when you're on vacation. I pledged it to my family. I succeeded, and we're all the better for it.
There's a reason we're recording this on a Wednesday, and that's because I'm going on vacation tomorrow. And let me tell you, I will not be checking a single email.
Good. Don't look at email.
Even though they all come to my phone for notifications, but I will not be looking at them.
Just turn them off.
Turn off notifications. This is very easy.
Too complicated. I'm not.
I've been telling you guys, you just delete the app.
I mean, that seems like a step too far. Give me your phone before you
go today, Holly. Are you kidding me?
That's a step too far. I'm going to forget to re-upload it.
Then you gotta. Confused. I wouldn't forget. To me, it just. Well, then you got to sign in when you re-download it. That to me is like I'm a pretty strong anti-notification guy. The only notifications I get are texts. Because if I had all my notifications on like Holly, I would be every 10 seconds looking at my phone, and I already struggle with attention, and I don't need another thing trying to grab my attention and distract me. So,
well, my phone is in another room, so I can't even look at it right now.
Fair enough.
It's at my desk, and I'm in the cafeteria. So if you hear noises, it's the bustling cafeteria at our headquarters.
Bustling.
All right, so let's dive into the news because I'm hungry and this needs to go.
You scheduled this for 12 o'clock.
Okay, so we're still in earnings season. We're gotten to the tail end of it. We've been talking about it for the past few weeks because it's kind of the news right now. It's, as Alicia loves to say, it's Christmas for us. Though Leanne and I were talking about Christmas earlier today for a different reason.
Holly was talking Christmas, not me. I just want it out there. Holly started it.
It's true. So anyways, we've seen a few themes amongst these brands. One of them is unit count. So McDonald's, after a long pause, has decided to start upping its game on unit counts in the US. Chipotle last quarter said they wanted to double to 7,000 units, which is absolutely insane. And we've seen Burger King also try to grow units. And what is it about these like three top brands that means that they're trying to grow again?
I think, I mean, on the one hand, yeah, restaurants want to grow their unit count, like across the board at all times. But right now, I think it's really a focus for a lot of these brands because they've had so many other things to focus on for the last few years. Like, how are we going to pay for the restaurants that we have? How are we going to make sure we're getting, beef in this burger restaurant? Those things took up more, I think, like brain space for companies than they usually do. And so long-term goals like unit growth have been by the wayside. And now, I mean, we've been talking about a lot of those other things are, still of concern, but much more under control than they were a year or two ago. And so companies are able to shift their focus and back onto those long-term goals. That's not to say we didn't have restaurants expanding by unit count last year, but you're right. A lot of the big ones are refocusing in on it now. And there's lots of potential here. I mean, McDonald's is looking into, like, obviously McDonald's is everywhere, but they're focusing on specific regions. They're targeting the South for their growth right now. We've got brands like Potbelly refranchising stores. I think we're going to see a big bump in franchising across the board. Just this morning, Wendy's announced that they're doing 200 more units in Australia with Flynn Restaurant Group, which just made its Australia debut with Pizza Hut. So, franchisees are more excited about the landscape right now. Just kind of like a lot of perfect storms pointing to unit growth. I'll say my nerdy heart is excited to see our top 500 data next year because I've been going through last year's unit data. And so I'm eager to see how this shakes out. Last year, we saw our like fastest growing unit chains were all like smaller emerging brands. So I'm excited to see some of these bigger guys like back on that list.
Well, first off, I picked the worst time to drink water down the wrong direction. And so as I continue to try to regain my composure and oxygen levels, bear with me because I might need to clear my throat and talk like a frog. So yes, let's start with this point. These companies that you mentioned largely are public companies. They have a mandate to grow. They have to grow. That's the stakeholders, what they expect of them. If you look at these companies, the last many years, unit growth has been very small. I mean, it's been sort of give a little, lose a little, in that they've grown some, they've closed some. But if you look at McDonald's, for example, they've hovered around that like 14,000 domestic locations number for many, many years. And sort of similar with some of their competitors. Whereas Chipotle, among the major chains, is unique in that it has always had a lot of runway, or always being that Chipotle is only, 27 years old, which is young compared to many of these other major chains. And so whereas a lot of the major chains kind of reached that saturation point earlier, Chipotle has not. I mean, it still has runway ahead of it. Excuse me. So the major chains reached a point of saturation, kind of leveled out, and then have been sort of hanging out there. I suspect because traffic has been really hard to come by for the last couple of years, that's why they've probably shifted their focus back to unit growth, because that's a way to grow. If you're not going to grow your traffic, and therefore you're not going to necessarily grow your profitability of each of your stores, grow your overall revenue, then you have to add locations to grow in that way. Once upon a time, a year ago, that was hard to do because of the supply chains issues you were mentioning, Holly. And those have not suddenly solved themselves, but they have, I think, kind of gotten a little bit better. So now when you see the supply chain ease up for the materials to build locations, you see the traffic levels still kind of stagnant, and that mandate to grow. All of this combines. And and the one final factor is this efficient model we've been talking about for so long is lending to smaller footprints with better profitability. So now that they have this option of building smaller locations that are doing just as good numbers, if not better, and they can squeeze those into plots that they once maybe could not have or would not have once looked at, but they now can with the help from third-party delivery companies and other off-premises channels. All of this sort of combines to give them, I think, permission to grow their unit count levels again. And again, when if you look at this fact that they have to grow somehow, that's suddenly an unattractive way to do it. Jack in the Box is one company I think about. I think a few months back on the podcast we wrote about, or we talked about and had written about their smaller footprint and how it's, doing some crazy amount of money per square foot compared to the QSR averages because it's so focused on off-premises service. And it's a very efficient model, and they keep it flexible where they can kind of squeeze it into these little plots here and there. That is a model for where QSR, I think, is going to continue to go because it opens up that white space. Again, not to belabor the point, but once upon a time, McDonald's just simply did not have white space because of real estate, that saturation. Well, now all of a sudden it looks a little bit different just because you can take advantage of real estate that you couldn't before. You have the tools available to make it more efficient. I mean, think about McDonald's. Didn't they just say that less than 10% of their business now is dine-in? I mean, when you think about that, okay, well, you don't need a dining room anymore for the most part. So yes, I think that's probably why we're seeing that unit count growth from the perspective of smaller chains, and I think also tied into franchising. The demand for franchising has increased in the last 2 years because post-COVID, just like post-last recession, that organically leads to an interest in franchising to, partner with a brand that can help you get into business at a season where it is difficult to do that on your own. The increase in franchise interest means that you have the Potbellies of the world that are refranchising, taking advantage of the demand for franchising, and the major QSR chains, that's in their interest to franchise corporate locations that end up being kind of money pits of, the expenses they have to pay. And they're not, this way they can use somebody else's money to grow. But from franchising, the emerging brands are kind of the only ones available. The major chains are not available to the mom and pop, or even not the mom and pop. But even if somebody's coming in looking for a 5 or 10 store deal, you just don't get those with the major chains anymore. So I think that's then why you see on the other side of things, the emerging brand really taking off with franchising and their unit counts growing quickly, is because if you want to franchise a restaurant, you're open-minded about what that restaurant is, and the big proven chains are inaccessible to you, you're going to find an alternative. And that's what the emerging brands represent today.
Well, it's interesting. You brought up profitability, which is something that we've seen from a few of our big brands, but they haven't really had profitability. So we're seeing brands like Sweetgreen inch closer to profitability. We're seeing Shake Shack inch closer to profitability. This is in contrast to a chain that's like Chipotle that has no debt. So it's interesting to see some chains are working this quarter towards getting profitability. But it's also interesting that, you brought up units becoming smaller. We have Chick-fil-A's new drive-thru that's bigger, that has 4 drive-thru lanes. It's more like the Taco Bell Defy. And so I think we're seeing off-premises grow, which is, I think, interesting, even in light of the fact that there was a pandemic and that we had to shift to off-premises. We're still seeing it grow.
Yeah, you're not going to see these smaller emerging brands open what Taco Bell did with Defy and what Chick-fil-A is doing with their new, that is a company that has cash on hand and is willing to invest in something really out there. And so Taco Bell and Chick-fil-A are pulling that off, right? So that's why you do still see these kind of big swings when it comes to a major investment in the real estate. But simultaneously, I don't know that Chick-fil-A ever gave any numbers on how many of those they want to open. But, right now, I don't think the objective is let's open 200 of these in the next year. It's like, hey, let's see how this thing does, because maybe in 5 years, we could justify really expanding these a lot more quickly. But going back to your point about profitability, it's really interesting. I think a global pandemic will do that to you. Will really kind of make you realize profitability is important. I think of, I read this morning that WeWork is about to go bankrupt. WeWork is a classic case of a tech forward company, especially, but just a company that exploded in growth, had everybody's attention, created this new business model that everybody was in love with. The sky was the limit, and yet it was never profitable. And so what happens when a global pandemic happens and everybody starts working from home and WeWork's service is no longer needed? Oh, well, you're gone. It's Uber is another case. I think Uber just turned their first profitable quarter in company history, if I'm remembering correctly. If I saw that, they've never been profitable because the model is just, it doesn't make sense from a profitability level. But Uber, as we all know, is highly, highly in demand. It just is, the costs are just insane. And so at some point that catches up to you. It caught up to WeWork. And I think kudos, especially to a company like Sweetgreen, that I think always fancied itself sort of like the Uber of restaurants, not in its actual product, but just in its reputation. And they were so tech forward for so long, and it wasn't profitable. And they've really started to turn that around, and they've really been forward about their food, and they're really, exploring ways to make it more convenient. And guess what? You're going to become profitable if you stop, doing these fancy innovative toys that don't make you money, and you focus on your core product that will make you money. And I just think, yes, the last couple of years, again, it's really been obvious that you got to get your books in order. You've got to turn a profit and just really focus on your unit economics and cash flow and all those things. Because if you just keep dumping money into something that's appealing to the customer but not profitable, you run out of runway on that eventually.
Well, and you mentioned traffic, which, we're seeing a dip in, and it's lapping a normal quarter. Finally, we had Omicron last year. This is lapping a normal quarter, but we're seeing traffic numbers kind of suffer. And I wonder if part of that is because this huge shift to delivery and takeout that we've all experienced, and catering. Like, these are all things that we've just permanently adjusted ourselves to use. We're not using things in person. You were talking about dining room shrinking. The McDonald's dining room, 10%. They're looking to gain traffic too. And so, I mean, is there a way that we can actually get traffic back up, or is that something that we're never going to be able to get?
I mean, somebody in our audience is going to have to correct me here, but I think you can still count a delivery customer as traffic. I mean, that's still a customer, right?
Yeah.
But it'll come back around, right? I mean, all these things are very cyclical. We are going through, I think, a very natural cycle of business. It's a little funky because of inflation and how sales by and large are up, but traffic is stagnant because of inflation. We talked about on a recent podcast, and I know our team has been doing some writing around just the fact that customers are going to hit their limit on how much they're willing to spend on restaurants. And so we'll see a natural come down, probably even with sales and traffic, which is part of the reason you had to solve traffic now, because if that does come back around, I think I think it's safe to say at this point, we're probably not going into a recession, but that doesn't mean you're going to start to see demand slip as people are just fed up with what they're spending on things. I'll just throw out a personal anecdote. At an airport yesterday, I paid $78 for the worst meal of my life for our family of four, but it amounted to essentially snacks. We just grabbed a couple things for the kids and some things that looked good for us. $78, and none of us finished our meals. Now, that's an airport, so what are you going to do? Captive audience, blah blah blah. But as I've shared on this podcast before, and you all have experienced yourselves, I've had more and more, what did I just pay moments without a significant payoff on the other side of like, okay, yeah, that was worth it. And I'm in a unique position to understanding some of the background of all of this. But just imagine your standard restaurant consumer who is just fed up with paying so much money across service fees and tips and increased menu prices. They will cry uncle eventually. And I say all that for the sake of traffic, because again, we're going to have a bigger traffic problem down the road. So you've got to figure this out now. You got to make sure people are coming in your doors, and there's lots of levers on how to do that. Of course, value has long, especially in QSR, been one of the ways to do that. You offer some value deals to get them to come in the door. But of course, that hurts your profitability if it's all discounting and value. Nowadays, you see a lot more strategies around loyalty and, maybe using value as a way to get them to become loyal customers. And then you use, loyalty programs to, once they're in, you get them with a loyalty program and they keep coming back. A lot of ways you can do it. But I think that's why it's such a focus right now, is because, sales were up 2022, but that's a mirage because of inflation. Inflation is cooling. Demand is probably, going to start cooling some as well. And so you got to find those ways to make sure the customers don't bail on you when they start bailing on restaurants in general.
We are seeing a lot of, in my opinion, creative strategies to try to boost traffic right now, which is kind of nice. 6 months ago, it was all about value. Everybody was playing the value game. That doesn't seem to be having the effect that they want on traffic. So restaurants are shifting gears and starting to focus on, okay, what can we do specific to our brand? So an example of this is RBI. They've got 4 brands and they've got different strategies that they've laid out across each of their 4 brands. So at Tim Hortons, they're broadening their beverage menu. Menu innovation is a big thing right now that can bring in new customers. Papa John's has been relying on it for a while and is still pushing menu innovation. Obviously, that's outside of RBI. But, they're still working on modernizing Burger King units. Their ongoing franchisee program is still in full swing over there. They're making changes to the kitchens at Popeyes. They've got a lot of development in the works for Firehouse Subs, which goes along with what we were talking about earlier. Of course, that's their newest brand. So I think it's interesting to see restaurants. And again, they have more space to think about things like this right now. We've been talking about as a team, we're seeing a lot more happy hour deals, which goes back to value, but it also focuses on bringing people into your restaurant during a traditionally slower day part. How do we get more people into our casual dining chain from 3 to 6 after the lunch rush, before the dinner rush, happy hour? Day parts are something I think a lot of brands are thinking about right now. Tim Hortons talked about trying to bring customers in the afternoons. Wendy's is pushing late night right now, which is kind of interesting. I feel like for the last 4 years, every time we talked about Wendy's, we talked about breakfast. And now they're going, wait, but come back, still come at other times of day too. So there's some interesting stuff going on, and I'm curious to see, what sticks, what works, whose traffic is going to look better next quarter.
Well, yeah, and we've seen people really rush to marketing, which is something that was gone from the industry for a long time. So we're seeing this increase in marketing, especially on McDonald's and Taco Bell's part. So I'm curious to see how that shakes out too.
For sure. Yeah, lots of big marketing moves, lots of, big money being spent in marketing. I mean, McDonald's, is always going to have the most money to throw at things like that. But yeah, other chains too, we're seeing more. I mean, I can't remember if I've talked about this on the podcast before, but something like 7 or 8 chains this year have been working with musicians specifically. So yeah, I feel like there's quite a bit of marketing money being tossed around. I mean, whatever it takes, to get your customers in the door. Hey, your customer's a Post Malone fan. Well, he's got his own Raising Cane's in Utah. It's just, yeah, that's what they're leaning on right now because they can.
And this is the TikTok, moment, the TikTok era, if you want to call it, right? And as audiences flock to something like TikTok, a big takeaway for brands is not only do you have to have a presence on TikTok, but what is it that appeals to them on TikTok? It's the influencers, it's the celebrities, it's the musicians. And so, brand partnerships with other brands. And when I say brand, I can mean, personality, celebrity, that have a lot of, cachet in the zeitgeist right now, right? It's a great way to ride some coattails, for lack of a better term, and to get a fan of Post Malone or a Snoop Dogg in Jack in the Box's case to come to your restaurant because they see that they're aligned to your brand. And so yeah, marketing, it's certainly not shooting fish in a barrel because, I mean, as we know, these celebrities, personalities, I mean, they are expensive. Like crazy expensive. And I'm not saying that because I've ever done any marketing with a celebrity, but I am saying that because we've looked at celebrity speaking fees and wowza. Let's just say that. So, you better make sure you know what you're doing with your marketing, and you better make sure it aligns with your own brand. But yeah, it's a great way to appeal to customers if what you want is more of them to visit your restaurant.
I mean, at the end of the day, you want everybody to come to your restaurant. There's the moral of our story today. Here are all the ways you can do it. Here are all the ways brands around you are doing it. But we want you to come to restaurants.
We're so good at our jobs.
We're great at our jobs.
We figured it out. We solved it for you.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw it over to Ron. And thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thanks, Holly.
Thanks, Holly.
Restaurant leaders need two things to grow their businesses. They need connections to better inform their decision-making, and they need a break. Running a restaurant company is hard work. Nation's Restaurant News is offering both this fall at our Create Experience. Held October 1st through 3rd in beautiful Palm Springs, California, the Create Experience promises to be an unforgettable 3 days for growth-minded restaurateurs. Better yet, it's totally free for restaurant leaders. Join us in Palm Springs to be a part of this one-of-a-kind experience. Visit create.nrn.com/Palm Springs to learn more and to register. That's create.nrn.com/Palm Springs.
And Jeff and John, I appreciate it very much. Jeff, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll turn to John.
Sure. Thanks, Ron. Jeff Kakara. I'm the CEO of 3 brands that we own here in Dallas, Texas. 60 Vines, obviously, the brand we'll be talking about today. Mexican Sugar, which I'm sitting in today, and another brand called Whiskey Cake. And so that's what I do.
And how many 60 Vines are there?
Right now, there's 7 60 Vines. We have another 3 in construction. Our next one will be to open will be Charlotte, North Carolina, here in about several weeks. August 21st is opening day.
And we're very fortunate on this time to have John Olney of Ridge Vineyards here. John, go ahead, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the partnership and how it came about.
I'm John Olney. I'm head winemaker for Ridge Vineyards. I've been with Ridge for a little over 25 years. I was the assistant winemaker and then became the winemaker at our Lytton Springs facility, which is where I am today up in Healdsburg. And then about 3 years ago, I took over as head winemaker, overseeing winemaking for both our Lytton Springs and our Montebello winemaking facilities. And, Ridge has always had a strong commitment to sustainability. We always say that the wines we make are all about place, which means it's all about nature. It was always in our interest to want to do things with sustainability in mind. And so when 60 Vines, approached us about the idea of doing something in kegs, it was appealing because, one of the things that we're really focusing a lot on in the wine industry is our carbon footprint. And one of the biggest factors there is in the production of glass. Glass requires an enormous amount of fossil fuels to, you're sort of melting rocks. And, stainless steel keg offers an alternative to that. And it's, by definition, very reusable. I mean, we have stainless steel tanks that we ferment in, and I have tanks in the winery here that were built in 1978, and they're every bit as good as the ones that I've had built last year.
Now, this relationship started in May, correct?
Yeah, kickoff was May, I think, right, Jeff?
Yeah, right about there.
And tell us a little bit about 60 Vines in your tap wine program and how Ridge fits into that. Jeff?
Yeah. It's Ridge has always been, obviously known for some of the best wines in the world. And our previous wine director, a guy by the name of Gene Zimmerman, he is probably one of the biggest fans of Ridge on the face of the earth. And when we started putting together, our plan on, who do we really want to try and partner with? Who do we want to really, what helps us really develop and grow this program? And there's a number of names out there, but the one that we kept coming back to was Ridge. And Gene, got with a handful of people over at Ridge before, I guess, meeting John at some point. But long story short, our due diligence and Ridge's vision, visionary ideas, especially around sustainability, kind of jived with us. And 60 Vines, the concept was founded. Our founder, Randy DeWitt, has another restaurant here near where I'm at in Las Colinas right now. and it does very high volume. And he was in the restaurant one day watching all these bottles go into the trash, and some going into, knowing that some go to recycle, but only about 20% of bottles really get recycled, if that. So 80% land or more land in the, in the landfill. So that was really one of the original ideas of 60 Vines and kegging tap wines came into his head. And then on another trip out to wine country, he was sitting and realized the beauty of, when you go to wine country and you have a really great meal, and some people have a little bit more luck being able to sit in the vineyards and enjoy, dinners with winemakers, especially those of us in the business. We get to see some things sometimes behind the curtain and really enjoy, some added experiences out there. And we had one of those, or Randy had one of those one day, and kind of married the two ideas to really bring kind of a wine country tasting room feel, combined with the sustainability side of what tap wine does. And it to John's point about making bottles, it is very, it takes a lot of heat and a lot of energy to produce a bottle of wine, or just the glass for wine. And then on the flip side, a keg is 26 bottles. So there's 26 bottles not going into landfill, potentially every time we tap a keg.
And that also includes corks and foils.
Corks, foils, yeah, absolutely. And then even just nowadays, and John, I don't know if you guys have, I think you may have your own bottling, or do you roll in the bottling trucks?
No, we have our own facilities.
Yeah, I thought you guys may have your own. A lot of wineries though are rolling in, mobile bottling trucks, and there's just another vehicle on the road burning gas going back and forth to a lot of different wineries bottling wines. So.
You, Jeff, mentioned that your son just got married and has a special connection to Ridge Wine.
My son actually just got married, and he was, John, you met him. He was the guy out there filming all that stuff. Well, he called me up about a few days before the wedding and said, "Dad, I got Ridge Chardonnay for my reception." And he was all geeked up because I guess you had given him a bottle while he was out there, and he just was, over the moon. And so you've created a new Ridge fan for sure.
Fan.
Yeah. So we were drinking Montebello Chardonnay, and it was fantastic.
Because it's just drinked in live, we always say what we're drinking. I'm just drinking a red wine. John, you said you were drinking a Montebello?
Yeah, I have. I've got the 2019 Montebello here in glass. We happened to have it open in the tasting room, so poured myself a glass of that, and it's actually drinking quite well.
You're drinking much better than I am. Tell us a little bit about Ridge and the Judgment of Paris.
So in 1976, a wine merchant from England, Stephen Spurrier, put on a tasting in which he featured 6 California Cabernets and 6 of the top French Bordeaux. And he did the tasting in Paris, and he invited French wine professionals, French winemakers. And, the wines were tasted blind. No one really knew what was going to happen. He sort of assumed, and a lot of people probably did, that the Bordeaux wines would be selected as the best wines. But in fact, it was a California Cabernet. It was the Stag's Leap that was chosen first. In the lineup of 12, I think Ridge at that time was chosen as a 5th wine. But a lot of French people said, well, California wines are all fruity and they don't age. So 30 years later, they actually reenacted the exact same tasting. And in that tasting, Ridge was selected as the top wine that had really gone the length of time, that he evolved and retained the complexity that you expect from a wine that can age. So it was a big moment for in the wine world, and certainly for the California wine world.
Well, and congratulations to you and Ridge. What do you usually drink when you're just recreationally drinking, John?
Well, at this time of year, in California where it's plenty warm, I turn more to the white wines, to the rosés. We've actually started making some rosé at Ridge from our Lytton Springs vineyard, which is very tasty, lighter in body, lower in alcohol, and it seems like the colder it is, the better it tastes. So lots of those kind of things. I like a lot of Italian whites, kind of little offbeat things like Arneus and Falangina. And same on the reds. I mean, I sort of move probably more towards Cru Beaujolais. We make a Carignan here at Ridge, which, a little higher acidity, a little lighter wine profile.
And what you're offering through 60 Vines is the Three Valleys Zinfandel, correct?
That's correct. And that's our one blended wine. It's a blend of a number of different vineyards, but it's Zinfandel based.
And I think we should let the viewers know the barking you're hearing in the background.
Yes, I'm sorry. I recently got a new puppy. It's a Rhodesian Ridgeback, and he's over there kind of having some fun with his playmate. He said he'd be quiet. But.
That's good. Jeff, what are you drinking? You're not drinking a wine. I noticed that.
Oh, no, and I'm remiss not to have a glass of Ridge in my hand, but like I said, I'm at Mexican Sugar today, and so I'm drinking a little bit of it's called the La Catrina. It was a drink we made for a Dia de los Muertos celebration that we had, and it's a kind of a mezcal-based riff on a margarita, a little tahini on the rim, and the marigold, which is the flower of the ceremony. But yeah, delicious, and it's 104 here in Texas, as you know, Ron. So figure we got something cold and icy.
Yes, the colder, the more ice cubes, the better at this point. Jeff, you had some data on how much you've actually saved from a sustainability perspective since introducing the Three Valleys Zinfandel. Could you mind sharing some of those?
Well, I can tell you that it's a mix of things. We've brought in almost 600 bottles. It equates to about 600 bottles right now from the time we started the process. And the number of kegs is now, divide that by 26, it's slipping my mind. But, and that's what's funny about it is sometimes when we say, we've sold 10 kegs or, say, 10 kegs. Well, it's 260 bottles, right? So we talk in bottles a lot of times to really make sure we understand the gravity of what the sustainability can be when it comes to the kegging. But beyond that too, it's just it's taken off very well. Our staff is obviously super excited about it. We did a great promotion and a kickoff with it, and it's just it's a fantastic wine, and people are really excited to see it on tap.
What kind of patina does bringing Ridge into this partnership give to the 60 Wines adult beverage program?
It just brings more legitimacy to what we're doing. I could tell you that when we went out, when the concept was started, a lot of the kegs that we would get were our kegs that were kind of in the market already, and it could be a range of quality, it could be a range of brands, could be a range, and there really wasn't a whole lot of dominant wine makers and players kegging wine at the time. And it's grown through the years. We've had some great partners along the way that have partnered with us even from the beginning. But when someone like Ridge comes along, it adds to that list and it adds to the credibility, and it also makes people realize that hey, fine wines can be put in keg, and they taste pretty darn good.
John, from the vineyard's perspective, what are the hurdles and benefits of a program like this?
Well, I mean, in terms of the winemaking, nothing's really changed. It's the same wine. And really, when it comes to bottling, I mean, bottling is probably one of the most complicated parts of the winemaking process. So when we go to keg, basically all we're doing is we're taking the wine out of barrel, we're blending it, and then rather than going through the whole bottling process, it just goes into a keg and we send it to a facility. So it's actually a simpler process for us. We just have to send the wine out of the winery, and then they take care of the whole kegging operation at a facility that specializes in that.
And does the kegging facility ship it to 60 Vines?
Correct. Yeah, and Jeff would know more of the details on logistics, but yes, they they ship it there, and then that same keg gets returned to them, refilled, and the loop repeats itself, which really is one of the biggest advantages of the stainless. Like Jeff said, I mean, glass is perfectly recyclable, but with a keg, you make it and you don't throw it into the recycling pile and it breaks and then it has to be remelted and remade. Once it's made, I don't know what the lifespan of a keg is.
Yeah, I think there is a lifespan. I forget what it is, but it's pretty long. I want to say 10 years at least.
Well, and especially when it's 104 degrees in Texas, sustainability becomes a big issue at this point.
Yeah, that's right.
Jeff, you were saying some of your best sellers on your list. Since when did the first 60 Vines open?
We're about 7 years ago now. 2016, like 2016, we opened, and it was we did a lot of. We had a custom line of keg wines that we called Vine Huggers at the time, and those were kind of our top sellers out of the gate, because a lot of people assumed that was kind of the house wine, if you will. But it was actually made by a great winemaker by the name of Bill Nettles, and he did some great stuff for us, and helped. He himself helped legitimize this concept too, and what we're doing.
And so those who are not aware or not have been to a 60 Vines, do you still offer different size pours and flights?
Yeah. So, and that's the beauty of it. So we have 60 taps on the wall, hence the name 60 Vines. About 50 plus, 55, somewhere around there, are wines. And the beauty of it is that you can come in and try any one of them. We'll give you a free taste of anything. And then you can do, which is about an ounce, we'll give you a free ounce taste of anything to see, have you find the right wine for yourself. Or you can do a flight, and you can do flights at, 2.5 ounces. And we'll sell you a 2.5 ounce pour all the way up to a full bottle, obviously. And the beauty of it is it's a low barrier to entry. One, you can taste anything for free. If you want to, if you like that taste, but you're not ready to pay for the 8 ounce glass or a bottle, and you want to sip it for a minute to make sure you truly like that White Tempranillo or whatever, Peak Pole or something, something different, or Ridge, you can do it at 2.5 ounces. And we have 2.5 ounce glasses starting as low as $4, all the way up. So it's low barrier to entry. You can really come in and find something different, something special. Try something like a Ridge that might be, maybe an 8 ounce glass might not be in your budget, but a 2.5 ounce pour is something you want to try, and there you go. There you start your addiction.
How do you market a premium wine like Ridge as compared to your other ones?
We obviously you look at our tap menu, and the tap menus are basically a placemat on the table, and it stays with you the whole experience, so you can be picking and choosing and doing your taste. We don't the prices are obviously on there. You can see what a 2.5 ounce pour is, you can see what a 5 ounce pour, an 8 ounce pour, and a bottle price is, but we don't we really don't hone in on on marketing at a different price level. Our servers are really taught to kind of, we do a different type of service. In a lot of restaurants, there's the 10 or 7 or 11 steps of service. We have four pieces to our service. It's welcome, tailor, host, tempt. And in the welcome, it's all about just getting to know where that person is kind of on the wine spectrum, what they're looking to drink. Are they adventurous, or are they just, hey, I'm here for a glass of cab and a steak? Or are we going to mix it up and do a couple of flights? Are we going to mix it up and do? So it's really just getting to know the guest and getting them into the right wine versus trying to get a specific wine into every guest. If that makes sense.
I'm especially interested in the tempting part of your 4-step program.
Yeah.
How do you train your staff to tempt people into trying more food or more drink?
Well, the tempting piece is towards the end of the meal, welcome, tailor, host, tempt, and when it's all said and done, the tempt is really how do you get them back, or how do you excite them to come back? And that's either we're doing a wine dinner, or we've got a couple new taps coming, or the temptation of dessert is also part of the temp, the temp piece, but it's really about trying to make that connection so they come back, and it's either, come back and see me. We've got a new rosé. Maybe we'll get some of that Ridge rosé from John in keg one day, but maybe it's something, coming down the road, we've got something that we're going to tap and you got to come check it out, or we've got a cool event coming, or, something like that. That's usually what the temps are.
Well, and speaking of tempting, John, what other wines would you consider for doing something in the sustainability mode?
Well, yeah, I mean, if we're talking about other wines that I think, would probably do well in kegs, I mean, white wine is not a big part of what we do, but we do make a Grenache Blanc from down in Paso Robles that is, it's a wine that, we make a Chardonnay like Jeff was talking about, which is something that certainly has a lot more ageability to it. We like to see people actually put a few years on it in bottle if they can. Whereas the Grenache Blanc is just something you make and you want to drink it as soon as it's done fermenting. So that's one that comes to mind. And like I said, for example, Carignan, things that present a little better in our portfolio at a younger age, seem to be the most appropriate.
Yeah, if it's a keg, you want to drink it. I mean, it's not, we don't age kegs.
Right.
We want to burn through them. So it's definitely, drink it while it's when it, it's ready now to drink.
Jeff, this is a question for you. Logistically, how do you order and get the wine in when you're dealing with a premier winemaker like this?
Well, so yeah, John had mentioned earlier, we Free Flow is probably our main kegging partner out there right now. They keg, they'll store, they'll ship to distribution. In most cases, it goes through Free Flow and then out into the distributor, into the local market. So, we have local distributors in all of our markets. Some are the same, some may be different from state to state, but it gets shipped into local distribution. And then from there, the local restaurant bar manager is ordering it, and it's coming on the weekly delivery truck, just like any other wine or liquor product.
And as you're expanding to other states, you mentioned North Carolina's next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a control state, so it makes it a little bit more difficult.
I was going to say, how do you deal with that? The liquor laws.
Yeah, we have our beverage director who's out there. He was out there actually last week working with the state store, who all this stuff has to get passed through those stores, and in those particulars, a handful of them around the country. It's really about relationships with your local state store, and making sure that they understand what you do, because in some cases, especially in the control states, they don't see a whole lot of kegs. But we have to work with the distributors to make sure they're in market from the distribution hub, and then into the state store, and then and then there's logistics from there, because in some states they don't deliver, and they have third-party delivery services. So yeah, logistically it gets, in some markets it can be really difficult. North Carolina is a little bit difficult, but it's people have been doing it for ages, and it's just the cost of doing business.
John, what is the biggest advantage for Ridge Vineyards in doing this project?
Well, I think it's, for us, it gives us the opportunity to, to experiment at this level, with something that is, obviously sustainable, to give it a try, to see, for us, it's kind of the opportunity for discovery, because it's uncharted territory. The Ridge has never done this before. So I think, I think when you look at sustainability, I think everyone agrees that there's no single answer to the issue of reducing carbon footprint. So you take the opportunities that present themselves.
You guys are 3 months into the forward-facing or consumer-facing part of this project. Any learnings or advice at this point?
Well, I was there for the kickoff, and to be honest, Jeff probably has a little better intel on just how the wines are being received. I mean, I certainly have only had good feedback, but it's indirect. Maybe California.
Right.
There's,
Yeah, no, the wines are being received amazingly. The team, obviously is behind it 110%. Our service teams out in the field, they, a lot of them are working for us because of the sustainability reason, and they really appreciate and buy into what we're doing, and we're always continuing. It's not just glass and the keg sustainability in our restaurants. We're trying to reduce our carbon footprint in a number of ways, and that's the mission of the restaurant and the company. But as far as how things are going with Ridge and the learnings, we've been doing this now for a long time, and we've learned our lessons through the years, and now it's really about us continuing to find great partners like Ridge and really grow this genre, if you will, of wine service. In our why, it's about changing wine culture through adventure and discovery. And yes, the sustainability piece is a huge piece on why we do it, but we also know that the wine culture in general, when we go and knock on doors, a lot of times we hear winemakers say, hey, my wine is just best in glass under cork, and that is what it is. And we respect and appreciate that. We do not look down our nose on that, but we still are going to continue to knock on doors and find partners to continue to grow the amount of wines that we can serve and the amount of wines we can introduce to our guests. And the beauty of our guests is they are searching for a little bit more adventure and discovery, and we are serving different wines that a 24 or a 34-year-old may never have. And to have a glass of Ridge of any kind, in your 20s is it might be a little different experience for some people.
I would have given my eye teeth to have had a Ridge when I was in my 20s.
No doubt. I can tell you, I remember the first time I had Ridge Montebello, which you're drinking right there, John, and it was an amazing experience.
What do you see as the future of sustainability in the restaurant and wine industries?
Well, I mean, I think again, it's about a multi-pronged approach. For example, we've talked about the partnership with 60 Vines in terms of kegs, but for everything we do put it in bottle, we've moved to lighter weight glass, which is certainly a step in the right direction. Less of a carbon footprint to produce, and then in terms of shipping, likewise. When we built the winery that I'm sitting in here years ago, we chose to build a straw bale winery. So obviously natural raw materials, very high insulation value. We have solar panels on the roof, so we're producing most of our own electricity. It's I think a lot is just in looking at doing sort of an audit of your what goes into producing a bottle of wine, and then finding the opportunities where you can get the same quality, but by reducing the footprint.
And Jeff, what does sustainability give to the restaurant operator as far as either labor, getting people, customers?
Well, I think our customers really appreciate the story around the sustainability piece, and they feel like they're doing their part when they drink wine from keg. But if I could answer just kind of the question around what sustainability looks like for restaurants, and the really the number one waste issue and the worst piece of the environmental damage that we do is really with the amount of food waste. Food waste is the number one waste going into landfills nowadays, and that is the piece that the restaurant community and we're trying to figure out, the whole composting issue. And so when you ask two answers to this question, is your question directly to me about what it looks like. It is a lot more work for us to sustainable. It is a lot more work for us, as it is for John to be more, organic or sustainable, or it is a lot more work, but it's work we all have to do, and it has to be part of the cost of doing business. And we need help technology wise to get there. We need help, from our stakeholders to get there. And at the end of the day, we need help from our teams to roll up their sleeves and buy in and just do it. And, those are the things we're trying to address piece by piece, to hopefully become more sustainable and a better partner to the earth.
Well, the fact that you've got Ridge, Three Valleys, Zinfandel now by the tap, I think is a step or a stride in that direction.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
thank you both for doing that and for the partnership. And thank you both for your time today. We appreciate it very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Thanks,
Good
Ron.
to see you, John.
See you, Jeff.
Yeah, take care.